We all know and love the masterpieces created by this artist. While WLOP is known for his painterly style and epic fantasy themes, I'm more interested in how he uses 3D in his workflow. Complex objects and backgrounds like this can take hours to paint by hand, not to mention the skill level required to pull it off. Using 3D helps shortening that skill gap for us artists and allows us to be more ambitious with our ideas. So in this video, I'll be attempting to use the same technique by painting on top of a 3D base I created to make it go from this to this. Watch till the end if you want to learn all the little tricks I use along the way. We need 3 things to finish off this illustration: the character, refining the composition, texturing, and detail. What WLOP usually starts off doing is blocking out the entire composition in value. This way he can have a preview of what the final image will look like very early on into the painting process. So before anything else, I'm gonna add in the sketch of Iris to help me visualize the final image. This is the one step that we didn't get to do when I was still working in Blender. Where you place the character is going to affect the image largely, so we want to work out all the kinks before we actually commit any time into rendering the image. Luckily for me, I already prepared some thumbnails beforehand. Oh my god, it has been 2 months since I've seen this thing. It's like trying to decipher an ancient manuscript. Well, it seems like past me wanted Iris to kind of sit on a pile of rubble, looking sad like she just fell from the ceiling and landed. The background was set in a library, but I made another one in a music store. I think that makes more sense. I will grab this to use as a reference for the character pose. Now, I'm not as good as a WLOP, can't sketch the character in off the top of my head like in his speed paints, so forgive me, I'll need some assistance, and I'll use Clip Studio's built-in posing model for this. Oh, I know what you're thinking.
But Rice Brush, why don't you just do it in Blender?
I absolutely hate rigging in Blender, okay? Maybe I just don't know how to do it properly, but I just like the one in Clip Studio more. Oh, if you guys don't know, the buttons up here are for moving the camera, and these here controls the object. You can change the length of the camera lens and other fun things in here as well. Just figured that might be useful for some of you guys. Back to posing. I think I'm happy with it. I think it looks alright. So now let's do a quick sketch and add in flat colors. With the colors, I'm just gonna go with whatever's on her character design sheet right here. Done. Looking good. The next thing I'll do is to draw the hair. I am imagining these thick, luscious locks falling. Yeah, so you've probably heard this a million times from other art YouTubers. You want to draw hair as big shapes.
Drawing the general shape of the hair.
Simple, rounded shapes.
Light shapes.
Find the shape. The shape is so important.
I'm starting off with the basic silhouette first and gradually add more details like the little twists and turns after I've got a good foundation. Now that we've got a basic sketch, let's add in some simple lighting to match whatever setup we've got for the environment. Let's hop back into Blender so I can show you the setup. Okay, so you can see here I've put a few light sources around, one shining from the top. That's our main light or key light if you want to be fancy. And we've got some weaker lights at the back and the front to fill in some shadows. That's it. That's the whole setup. So back to Clip Studio with the posing model here, we can actually adjust the light source on the model to match it with the setup we got in Blender. You just go into here and grab this ball here, move it around to adjust the lighting. So the light's probably hitting from behind and on top of Iris, like this. If you want to see how I made this entire scene, check out my other video where I spent 30 days learning Blender from scratch just to make this environment. And I'll just use this as reference and add a layer of flat shadows and a layer of flat light to our sketch. The character looks good. Let's ignore it for now and go back to work on the background and the composition. As it is right now, it is complete trash. I mean, unusable as a final background. So we're gonna have to do some post-processing to make the whole image more cohesive, or should I say animation. There are a few ways to do this. You can definitely do this step inside of Blender itself if you're fancy pants and good with shaders. I'm not. So unfortunately, I'll have to paint over the image manually. The first thing I notice is the image is way too zoom out. I think it makes the character really small and has way too much useless, negative space. So let's crop the image. I will also do a couple adjustment layers on top, curves to level the contrast, and posterization to add in some subtle color shifts like this. Let's lower the opacity so it's just very subtle shifts in color to make these areas more interesting. Then the issue are these disgusting textures and sharp edges that are way too eye-catching. For example, here, here, and here. It really shows how much effort goes into the 3D stage, huh? And finally, I'll add in some ambient occlusion as well for some contrast to direct the eye towards iris. Looking at this now, I realize that the composition isn't exactly balanced. So see how there are more dark masks over here compared to the other side? Kind of makes the image feel off balance. But I'm also too lazy to go back into Blender to fix this. So I'll just have to hand paint these in. Also, this rubble and this rack in the foreground needs to be separated more. Right now, they feel like they're merged with the items at the back, so we're gonna add in some magic fog. Also, one thing I noticed from WLOP, he likes to use soft objects like hair and clothing to add flow into his paintings. Obviously, you need to figure out different ways to achieve that with different settings, but it's good to keep that in mind. And I think that does it for now. The composition looks pretty good to me. This is before the fixes and after. The whole image just feels more balanced and pleasing. I separated some of the background elements and adjusted their values as well to emphasize that atmospheric perspective. We will now move on to the final stage, texturing and detailing. Alright, now that the background is touched up, we'll need to catch up on the character side of things. We have way too many layers, so everything for the character is separated in group, like this is its own layer and that is its own layer, and we can just add in layers on top of the base if we need to add any effects. So I started with detailing her face. I was kind of torn in between an annoyed expression or a mortified, like she just got banished from the sky kind of shocked face. Eventually, I went with the annoyed expression. Definitely not because it's easier to draw. And I added in her costume details as well. Oh, you're still here. The rest is just detailing, and at this point I feel pretty exhausted. I feel like the final stages of a painting are always the most boring to me. So I developed this weird habit of adding random stuff into a painting as Easter eggs for people to find. I'm just procrastinating, to be honest. The things I do in this stage are usually based on my intuition. Most of the time I'll end up spending hours liquefying the face or adjusting curves for like 20 times until I'm satisfied. And here's the final image. Definitely a very good workflow if you're willing to invest the time to learn some basic 3D. I think it helped me a lot in terms of being able to quickly get different shots and lighting conditions. Having the textures done in 3D definitely speeds up the final painting stage, even though the 3D took like 10 days to do. If you want to see how I struggle with the 3D part, watch this video next. Bye!